G'day folks. I'm just getting stuck into this little Johnson this is JW21E. It's a nice vintage outboard. Picked it up for a slab of beer basically. It's got good compression still. Originally I didn't really know because the pull starter didn't work, and I worked out the main problem with this is that all the grease they've used to lubricate it over the years has gone into a rather tenacious glue just from sitting. It's been in storage for God knows how many years. The fuel smells terrible, and it's been attacking the cast alley cap. Cast alley cap's turning to mush, but thankfully the rest of the tank looks really nice. There's just a slick of oil and the fuel remains have separated. Like they won't blend with the oil anymore. So I'm going to give that a good clean out. Give everything a good clean up and degrease. Just trying to get into it. It's got old AC 24K spark plugs. Marine M24Ks. They don't make them very easy to service in the field, that's for sure, because you've got to drop this lower casing and get all these bolts out before you can lift the tank off it. Not like today where you just pull a lever and the whole top cowling comes off. But I'll get him out. We'll have a look at the top of the engine. But yeah, that's the fuel tap. Little carburetor in there. Tap was off when I found it, thankfully, so none of the bad fuel's been sitting in the carby eating it. Give it a good clean out anyway. But it should run again. The guy who dropped it off at the junkyard said it ran fine when he stored it. Didn't say how long ago he stored it, but it's a long time ago. So it should be good. Just got to re-lube everything. Same with the linkage on the ignition advance and retard, or throttle or whatever it is, it's both linked together. That's stuck because it's just the grease has turned into glue. That's a bit of a shame. Well, not entirely unexpected for an old Johnson. The coils have shed their skin. I think it was about a 6 horsepower I had a while ago which had done the exact same thing. Even this whole collar looked the same. Unfortunately I don't have that outboard anymore, so I can't just borrow the coils out of it. So I'm going to have to find some more, I think. I'll give it a go as it is. I've got a couple of plugs hooked up, and I'll just spin it over a couple of times and see what happens, but I don't think they have much life left in them, if any. Points are nice and clean and there's no muck up the top. I just got to lube that bearing up there so that all this moves again. The grease has gone so stiff it just doesn't want to move. All in there underneath. Just glued it together. Well, surprisingly enough it still has spark. The insulation hasn't broken down completely. Won't be far off though. So it's all good. Well, for now. It's going to be interesting, but it should run again for a while. I know you can get new coils for them, so a vintage machine like this, it'd be well worth buying a set of coils, especially since it's in such good nick. Everything else in this engine should still work. I'll get a new water pump and probably a carby kit and some other stuff while I'm at it. And this is freeing up gradually. Got the rest of the inox dumped into there, which wasn't much, but I'll get another can tomorrow. Alright, well it's looking a bit naked at the moment because I got the bottom cowling off. I had to take the swivel bracket off and just drop it out the bottom. It's not too hard. Giving the carby a good clean up. That's mint condition inside, it's nice. Just adjusted this nut here because this mixture adjustment screw was just floating around and loose. So there would have been a bit of an air leak there. It seems to have a bit of gland packing in there, so you just got to tension them every now and then by the looks of it. I'll get some new fuel hose soon because this stuff's rock hard. But everything else is fine. The carby's nice and clean, spotless. Just got to put the muffler back on, or sorry, intake chamber or baffle. This thing here. Don't know who's sending a high-low attack signal out here. Not a proper siren though, it just sounds like a house alarm or something on the fritz. It's a metal screen just to catch large objects and bugs. Yeah, it's just an intake chamber. I'll blow him out with carby cleaner and see how we go. Clean him up. The grease has just turned to glue. That's why the whole thing is all sticky and gooey. Fuel tank's soaking. I've got some premium in there to dissolve the old oil. It's all settled down here. Looks like a bloody bedpan. Weirdest looking fuel tank I've ever seen. Still sounding the alarm. Something's going on. Oh, it's starting to clean up pretty good. I'm giving it a very brief degrease and wash. Most of the original paint's on it, so I won't be painting it. It's in really nice condition. The prop's bent, and I noticed the key or something is stripped. It's just flopping around on there. So I'll take that off afterwards and just check this bottom part of the leg out. I'm just doing this bearing here, main swivel or tiller or whatever you want to call it. I'm not a boating guy, so I can't tell you what it's really called. But that's what the engine swivels on. It's the main mount for raising and lowering it. It's got a clip there to lock it into place, and a lot of nasty old grease. There's a little pressure plate there which you adjust with a grub screw to adjust the stiffness of it, and that bears upon this little Teflon or nylon band which fits over there. Just like that. So that's got to go back together like that. I'll probably end up just putting a big blob of grease in each side of the housing and sandwiching it together. No real gaskets on it. I think the grease just keeps all the water out. Just pack it till it keeps coming out. It looks like there's some goo on there, so I might put a little bit of sealant on it. There's rubber O-ring up there and down the bottom, so it makes sense to seal it 100%. But overall it's not bad. Yeah, main thing is just pump grease in until it comes out everywhere, and you know, water can't get in. Water won't displace grease, especially at that sort of depth, because water's only really going to come up to about halfway at the most. Or there. It's just splashing. You know, only have this part of the leg in the water. I'm not too sure on the exact depth, but it ain't far enough to bother it. So I'll clean these bits up next, pack it with grease and put it back together again. Everything else is cleaned up alright. Carby's mint condition inside, so that's about it. It's in really good nick. Well, I figured to grease this thing up I'd pull out something that's even older than this outboard. This is an old Department of Defence military vehicle grease gun. Still has the broad arrow Department of Defence stamp on the bottom of it. No other markings. It's just a normal compression type grease gun. You just push on it. Doesn't work in tight places obviously because it's got a rigid nozzle on it. But very neat little find. It came from a friend of mine actually. Loaded old tools and things. This was sitting in the bottom of the bag. It's quite neat. I think this is why they M3A1 submachine gun got the nickname grease gun. It was introduced to replace the Thompson, and because it was pressed sheet metal, the top of it sort of looked like the end of a grease gun. It just had a big grip on the bottom of it and a short little barrel. So that's probably why the M3A1 got the nickname grease gun. As you can see, still works. Nothing wrong with it. The old leather cups on the piston are getting a bit old, but it still works just fine. It had LM or high-speed bearing grease in it before, but I just purged it out and cleaned it for waterproof marine grease. Something very modern, a lot more modern than what would have been used in it, but it's all good. Yeah, this thing is in wonderful condition. A little bit of wear on the plastic sleeves, but they're a consumable item, and even then it's just not worn out of spec. Once it's all packed with grease, this thing will be perfect. The rubber O-rings are still perfect. There's no sign of salt water damage. It's always been used in fresh water. No sign of oil leaking from the gear head here. The I don't know what you'd really call it. It's like a right angle drive. Only thing is, I think they've just hit something and busted the propeller safety key, like a sacrificial key that shears off just in case of collision, and you avoid damaging anything else. It just gives out as soon as you hit something and protects the rest of the engine. You can still see part numbers on everything. These were sealed together with gasket goo, and I'll just do the same thing. I'll use some Loctite grade Permatex or something like that, whatever I've got on the shelf. Just flange sealant, that's all. Nothing too permanent. It's only flange sealant. Just scrape him off and try again with some new stuff. Bit of discoloration on the exhaust port cover because it's not water cooled, but that's pretty typical. Everything else is right, carby cleaned up right. Time to put this together. Pump some grease into it with the vintage grease gun. Works perfectly again. Put my little key back in. That's just like a Gibbs strip. It just adjusts the pressure on these rings so that the engine doesn't wobble around, or just increases your steering ability. It stays in one place. You can actually let go of the tiller and the engine doesn't suddenly go and start straightening up or doing whatever the hell it wants. It doesn't wander. It's like adjusting the steering on a car. Alright, well, the swivel's all back together again and packed with grease. I emptied that 1.5 times into it and started to see a bit come out of the Gibbs strip screw hole, so that's pretty good. Probably repack it again before putting it into service. I would like to find someone with a boat that we can try it on. I'm just making some little copper shims to go either side of the swivel mount, trunnion or whatever you want to call it. You can see there's been a lot of galling from lack of lubrication. That side's even worse, so I made some shims out of this old copper sheet. That was actually a inductor coil from an old Danfoss VLT drive. I incinerated the transformer inductor coil to get the scrap copper out, and I like this stuff so much I decided to keep some because it's good for making copper gaskets. So, not all was lost. I did scrap a fair bit of it, but I did keep some heavy copper sheeting. It's nicely annealed too from the heat. You can see where it got fairly hot, but that makes it fairly pliable. So, if you have two similar metals, you can divide them with dissimilar metals. You could use stainless steel or shim stock or copper or brass or whatever. But alloy on alloy like that usually results in galling and seizing. Same with stainless on stainless. You've got to use nickel based never seize or anti-seize on it to stop it from galling up and seizing. Stainless is probably one of the worst things to try and thread or screw into with stainless bolts. Ah dear. I was just turning it over again after reassembling everything. Now I could hear this faint crack 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 sound coming from under here. And yes, even before I got it started, the coils decided to shit themselves. But that's alright because, well, there's a computer just behind me. That means I jumped on eBay and bought 2 brand new coils off eBay for $77 shipped straight to my door. So I got 2 brand new replacement coils, much better than the old-fashioned ones. So we'll resume this once I've got new coils on it because I want to fire this thing up. We'll drag it outside, connect some water up to it, and see what happens. Though I will give the leg a quick inspection just before we call this quits. But as for running it in this video, it's not going to happen. Good excuse to clean everything up in here, but you can see a nice big fracture coming through from the high tension lead, and that's where it's arcing. Probably the same with that one there, there's a big fracture. Very typical of Johnson engines, but the good thing is, unlike many manufacturers that change the coils and things for every single model revision, These coils were used on engines all the way up to the 1980s, I think, even 1990s. They're a very standard coil. The 6 horsepower modernised Johnson that I gave away a while ago, the green one, had exactly the same coil, exactly the same problem, and I found a pair of them at the junkyard which were the modern version potted in green epoxy or something, and they worked perfectly. If I had that engine still, I would have swapped them over, but that engine's in a good place now, so I'm happy to buy a couple of new coils for this. Points are perfectly clean, they're still in remarkable condition. I'll just replace that little foam wiper there. That's an oil wiper that's just degraded into nothing. The cam lobe looks nice, it's not scored. Yeah, about as it was from the factory. So I'll just clean this up and go from there. Well, that's what's left of the propeller drive pin. It's just a little cross pin going through there. It's a sacrificial item which is obviously sheared into 3 pieces, but it's all still there. I mean, I don't know what kind of pitch this propeller is supposed to have on it. It doesn't appear to have hit much. It's got a few little scrapes on it, but I don't know, maybe it is supposed to have that kind of angle on it. I'm not a boat expert, but it looks pretty good. It's not cracked or visibly mangled, so maybe it is supposed to look like that. But either way, it's just sheared that pin there. Seals are 100%. I've taken this plug out and checked the oil, and it's still at absolute 100% level. Hasn't leaked a drop. Probably be a different thing once it's running, but for now I'm just going to leave it as it is. Oil's a very light amber colour. Smells alright, looks alright, feels alright. So I'm not going to disturb what I don't have to. But I will try and undo these bolts and drop this drive out and just see what the water pump's like. And that'll be the last step before I just wait until I get coils. And then we'll stick it in a tub of water and see what it does. I expect it would run, because we've got fuel, we've got compression, and we will have ignition once I have new coils. Oh, there we go. The bottom drives off, and I was the first one to take it off. Judging by the way the paint cracked off everything, and this is original paint, I'm the first person to have this thing off in about 50 years, I'd say. A little bit of soot on the shaft from the exhaust, but that's about it. Little oil, water cooling tube still up inside there. That's the only thing I've got questions about is the cooling system. Splines are still fine. The gearbox oil is original too. As soon as I tried to undo that screw, all the paint came off it. Nobody's ever had it out. They've used it, rarely, in fresh water, cleaned and dried it. This is all water surface contact area. If this was a saltwater engine, this would all be oxide. But I can't see a single bit of oxide in this at all. Maybe a little bit of dirt down there, that's about it. This thing is mint. It's a shame about the coils, but I've got some coming off eBay, so should be able to make it work really nice. I'll try and find a boat to put it on and I'll learn how to use it. Better get this water pump housing off and just see what the impeller's like. Hopefully it's as mint as the rest of it and I don't have to buy a new one. Although I'm sure I can buy a new one fairly cheap if I can get new coils for it. Especially because the old ones are doing that. When they get to that point, you throw them in the bin. Well, the water pump's looking wonderful. For something that's never been apart, it's practically new. It's not cracked, it's not hard, hasn't collapsed. Still takes a bit of care to actually get it to fit inside the housing, but it's very nice. No real wear on the plate there, separator. This oil seal is not leaking. I'm not going to provoke it or clean it. You can see a tiny bit of oil around it, but that's because I've been moving the shaft around. Probably will need seals soon, but I think they'll work long enough to do a good test on it. The worst thing is storage just lets rubber perish. I'm surprised the water pump impeller is so good. I've never seen one that good. Most of them are due for replacement by the time I get them. I know I've run a couple of outboards dry before, but I always anticipated replacing the impeller, which I did on the Johnson before I got rid of it. New gaskets, new impeller, carby kit, and yeah, sold it off to a friend. But this one's really nice. It's in very good condition. So we run this one with water, and we run it tomorrow. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. I've got to get coils. I would run it tomorrow if I had coils, but we'll run it next weekend. They'll be in by next weekend, so I'll just get this thing back together again. All nicely cleaned up. So that's the end for that one for now. I'll do a video once it's all back together again. Or at least when I get the coils and put it back together again. Thanks for watching.